Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm a little late to this particular party, but let's get started with some builds going into synthesis. We've had patch notes, we've had gem information, and we've had a few days to mull it over. So, I've got a few path of buildings here, some more fleshed out than others. This is probably the most fleshed out that we're starting with here. That should all be pretty decent starters aside from one, which is not going to be a great starter, but is a very interesting build that's going to be getting some significant buffs next league that I think is worth mentioning. And which I will have a starter variant of, but I don't think it'll be as good a starter as some of the others. So this right here is a Martyr of Innocence Fireball / Vol Detonate Dead Occultist, and it is hit-based, not ignite-based. You can definitely do an ignite-based Fireball build if you want. I'd go Trickster or Elementalist for that. But for a hit-based variant, there's plenty of choices. I've gone with Occultist because I really like the idea of Vol Fireball plus Corpse Explosions from from Profane Bloom, giving you really nice clear. And then I basically just wanted an excuse to use the new Vol Detonate Dead for single target assistance because I think it's going to be very powerful for that. You drop a Unearth Totem, you drop Desecrate under the enemy, you pop Vol Detonate Dead, and it just keeps popping away like little popcorn explosions of death while you then spam whatever your other fire AoE skill is that has, you know, the same sort of synergies that Vol Detonate Dead wants. In this case, Fireball. You could maybe do Flame Blast, you could maybe do Magma Orb, and any of these builds, if you have the space for it in a pseudo 5-link, or in this build, in actual legitimate second 5-link with your staff or chess piece, you can just throw a Vol Detonate Dead in, and provided you take the time to prep some corpses, it'll do some good damage, because Vol Detonate Dead got some absolutely crazy buffs. It has ridiculously high base damage as well as 200% effectiveness. It's a very powerful skill now. I think it's definitely worth considering if you're playing a build that has some synergy with it that you can throw it into for some extra damage. This may not be specifically the best setup. That high damage effectiveness leads me towards Immolate, but there are potentially some other better gems. I think Immolate's still correct, though. Either way, it's also potentially a source of something like Combustion for your main links if you don't want Combustion in your main links. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with it. It's really high utility, really high damage, and I mean, this is on a pretty significantly budget variant as well. We've got a 5-link Martyr of Innocence and a 5-link Carcass Jack. This could be a Tabula as well if you wanted. You can lose some damage and some AoE, but that's fine. I also experimented with Venomous Shroud. As far as the defensive aspects of the build goes, it has actually quite a bit of block. You pop that Roomies and you got 68% block chance and 27% spell block chance. That's thanks to some of the new staff nodes on the tree, thanks to Martyr of Innocence having a decent amount of block to begin with. And then you get the Fire Pen if you've blocked recently. So it's got high block defensively. It's got quite a lot of ES with a Mind Over Matter Eldritch Battery setup. You can either have Eldritch Battery on the tree, or if you can get your hands on a Devouring Diadem, then you're able to switch it up and get another curse in there, potentially. Or, you know, if you want to keep the third curse, then you can maybe drop some crit multi to have this in. You just need to make room for the Eldritch Battery somewhere if you don't have Devouring Diadem. And then obviously there's the defensive power of going Enfeeble, going Temp Chains, various defensive curses. They did get nerfed, but they're still quite powerful, especially on Occultist. So there's a lot of mitigation between block, between defensive curses, a good amount of EHP with the Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter. The only issue with the build, and the main weakness that I can see it having, is that its recovery is not going to be massive. You can cover that over somewhat with a Cinder Swallow Urn, but in a single target situation, it's mainly going to be Devouring Diadem and, you know, life flasks, instant life flasks, which should be enough if your positioning is good, and the damage, particularly once you get a 6-link and you start getting some real nice rares into the build, and you start just getting good gear together, the damage between Fireball and Vol Detonate Bed popping off underneath the boss should be more than enough that you won't be in a boss fight for very long. But that is probably the main weakness of the build, and keep that in mind if this is one you're choosing. I think it's a powerful league starter and definitely a good option. If it seems fun to you, go for it. But yeah, probably about an 8 out of 10 build. If it had really good methods of sustain, I'd give it like a 9 or a 10. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one here. This is not really a finished one. That is certainly not a league starter. This is a Divine Ire Trickster here. This is just the tree. I don't have much in the way of gear. I've been experimenting with Kintsugi, Queen of the Forest, and actually, what is it called? The Snowblind Grace upgrade. It gives phase acrobatics, perfect form. Perfect Form, Kintsugi, and Queen of the Forest are all interesting chess piece options. The issue with all of these is that they are pure evasion, so coloring them would be hell. But you can always start with the Tabula, as you can with most League start builds. It is actually pretty hefty opportunity cost to start with the Tabula on this, though, so that is one weakness of the build going into it immediately. But Divine Ire's numbers look really good. Obviously, I can't reflect that since we don't have the numbers in Path of Building. So what I've got here is I've got Unearth, which is just a physical spell, so that was to simulate some similar scaling to, help me path around and figure out which nodes might be the best. And Lightning Tendrils actually has basically the same exact cast time as Divine Ire. And I think cast speed is going to be really important with Divine Ire, because what's really powerful about it, and let's transition over to the browser scene in just a moment. If I can get the gem information here, there we go. What's really impactful, what's really, really powerful about Divine Ire is the 100% more damage with hits per stage after the first, and the 70% more damage with ailments per stage after the first. This is going to effectively shoot your effectiveness of added damage straight up through the roof. It has similar vibes to me to Scourge Arrow, and Scourge Arrow is extremely powerful. I'm not going to promise that level of strength because Scourge Arrow has all the backing of flat alley stacking with bow builds just being crazy strong, but still it's powerful behavior, and I think Divine Ire will be a very strong skill, provided you can quickly get to max stacks. It's a similar situation actually to Blade Flurry. Blade Flurry with low attack speed feels terrible. So I feel like Divine Ire with low cast speed is going to feel terrible, because it's all about getting that Kamehameha laser built up as quickly as possible. And since you gain an additional stage when you hit a normal or rare enemy, when you hit a rare unique enemy and you have a chance to gain one on normal or magic, that means that with cast rate of 10 and a guaranteed proc every hit, you're going to be at 20 stacks in 1 second as a Trickster if you go with this tree. And that's just the tree. That is admittedly with the ghost barriers. What are they called? Ghost shrouds up. And so that's 36% lower cast speed without that. And this jewel is simply just standing in for the ghost barriers being up. So it's a 36% cast speed buff. If we drop those, you can go down to 8.5, which is still pretty damn respectable. These will be up most of the time. If you take a few hits rapidly in a boss fight, they'll drop off, but they'll come back up pretty quickly. As far as the tree goes, though, it was a bit of a juggling act trying to figure out exactly where I wanted to go. I eventually settled on a dual wield setup with Dark Arts, but I think there's legitimacy to going one hand and shield and picking up Arcane Swiftness and Arcane Guarding. The reason why I didn't go that is because blocking a hit still counts as being hit, and so you would then lose a stack of your Ghost Shrouds, and that would not feel very good. So I went for a dual wield route instead of doing block focused stuff, and other than that, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's gone crit. An emphasis on cast speed, like I mentioned. We've got Nimbleness, which was newly buffed to have some crit multi and crit chance. We've got Force Shaper, which was newly buffed to have cast speed associated with it. We've got the channeling / cast speed wheel over here that I'm actually not 100% sold on, but Singular Focus plus the new channeling support gem plus Arctic Armor is a lot of Fizz mitigation. And speaking of mitigation, we can talk about the defensive layers. This is yet another Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter build. We can very easily, as I mentioned, fit Perfect Form in for some spell dodge through Phase Acro, and then spell dodge through Escape Artist. So a good chunk of avoidance there. And on top of that, you've got the potential, if you want to go a little lower damage, to drop Harness the Void, pick up Patient Reaper, and get a little bit of flat fire into your build, start igniting things, and get recovery on kill. Not just the 2% recovery, but also a percentile recovery scaler, which would be crazy. And then, hey, Devouring Diadem, it's good. I fully expect Devouring Diadem to be rather expensive this league, by the way. So this is another tree that, drop 2 points somewhere, you just have Eldritch Battery. This is the pre-Diadem tree, that's the post-Diadem tree. It's pretty simple and easy. This is a level 93 tree, so you just drop a couple points, maybe a 5% life node there, a 6% life node there, and boom, you have Eldritch Battery. As well as that, this build and the last one being Eldritch Battery builds without a lot of innate resistance to it might have some troubles with Chaos Res. You might want to prioritize that more on rare gear, because Chaos damage will still bypass Energy Shield, which means it'll bypass your Energy Shield and go directly to your mana, making your Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter far less effective. Even if you don't have any mana left for it to go to, it just means it ignores your mana pool, essentially, because it's energy shield. But anyways, on to the next one, and all of these will be linked in the description below. Let's take a look at the Ice Trap Saboteur tree. This is a fairly generic crit Mind Over Matter Saboteur tree. I think you could really take this and throw pretty much any trap in here. You know, if you go like Lightning Trap, maybe you pick up Lethal Assault because you really want that proj speed. You could even justify getting it on Ice Trap. It's hard to get all the points you want to on this build because there's so many good nodes, so many good damage nodes all over the place that something had to go. I'm still not even 100% sure that Lethal Assault was that thing, but it didn't have any trap throwing speed or trigger area, unlike some of these other semi-optional damage nodes, so I went for those instead, given that I feel like that utility is hard to pass up, but I may need more area scaling for Ice Trap to feel good. And really, you could take the same tree and throw the same concept as my old Fire Trap build in here. You could, as I said, throw Lightning Trap in. You could throw Arc Traps if you want to, you know, still play Arc even post nerfs, which honestly I think would be perfectly fine. Pretty stock standard Trap Saboteur tree. I have double Eclipse Solaris because these are 1C wands that I think are going to be pretty decent early on, but honestly I didn't do all that much with the gearing. This is, again, a tree that can use Devouring Diadem, because you can go Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter, and if you don't want to go regular Mind Over Matter. Right now it's regular Mind Over Matter, but yeah, get ready to see a lot of that on a lot of builds. Mind Over Matter, Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter, and Low Life and CI are going to be all over the place this upcoming meta. A lot of buffs to spellcasters, and a lot of buffs to ES in general. Pretty simple. I'll have a link to the tree in the description. And last but not least is a build that I certainly cannot take full credit for, and there will be a YouTube video linked in the description of the build in action this league pre-discharge buff, deleting Shaper in quite literally 2 hits. And I'm going to show you the endgame variant first, which there's a few different variations on, but the one that was used in the video, I'll show you the path of building. Please be aware, this that I'm about to show you is not League Start. Not League Start. But it is just something I want to show you to demonstrate the potential of this skill in the endgame. So this is with endgame investment, 2 Precursor's Emblems with +1 power charges, 2 Void Batteries +1 power charge, and a helmet with life res and +1 max power charge, which honestly, this could be better. I feel like the tier of gear that's in every other slot, this seems a little underwhelming. But basically, +1 power charge everywhere you can get it. This is also with everything checked. Basically, the goal here is to show maximum possible DPS. And as well as that, actually, Soul Mantle with +2 AoE gems. And you can see that Discharge goes a little crazy when you give it that much damage. This is only a 6-link, by the way. The Empower is not currently enabled. It was just to compare gem stats. But this is also a level 21 Discharge. As I said, this is very much endgame. So yeah, Discharge with totems is currently behaving oddly, and I honestly thought it was a bug. I thought it was going to be addressed going into next league, but it was not in the patch notes. Currently, if you have a totem, and that totem casts Discharge, and you have power charges or frenzy charges, the totem deals damage based off of your power or frenzy charges without expending them. So it can therefore keep casting Discharge with the benefit of those power charges as far as damage is concerned, but you don't have to continue generating power charges. Obviously you do eventually because they only last a certain duration, but it's way easier to generate your power charges once every like 14 seconds than it is once every cast. So you end up with very consistent casts of Discharge, and Discharge has never had a damage problem. You can get ridiculously high hits with Discharge. The problem has always been sustaining casting it because of charge requirements. But if that's not a thing, Discharge becomes very broken. Fair warning, GGG may see fit to change the behavior of this before next league. It may even be slated to be changed. It may even already be changed without being in the patch notes, because this legitimately may not be the intended behavior. It is hard to tell. Totems cannot gain their own offensive charges. They can only gain endurance charges. For every other damage calculation, totems will use your offensive charges. That's why building a power charge for yourself gives your totem additional crit chance. So it is in line with that behavior. It's just a outcropping of that behavior that is so ridiculously powerful that it may have to have a special exception case and be toned back. Because as you can see, with full min-max endgame gear, we're getting an average hit that is veering on 3 million, and that is one hit will do that much damage. And this is versus Shaper. Now, normally, this is a box you don't check, but Shaper has somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 million HP. If we uncheck the shock box, we're doing 1.9 million damage without a shock to Shaper. You need to do 10% of the target's maximum life in order to shock them for a full 50% effectiveness shock. This build actually legitimately shocks Shaper, so you can press this button, and on the second hit you'll get that level of damage. Actually legitimately shocks Shaper. It's a little gross. It's a little gross. And then take into account the fact that that is the average hit, so you multiply it by cast rate, which is 1.72. So I'll go ahead and do that on my little calculator over here. 2871001.9 times 1.72. And then we take that number and we multiply it by the fact that we have one additional totem from Soul Mantle, one additional totem from the tree, one additional totem from Hyro, and one totem base. So we multiply that number by 4 times 4 equals 19,752,493 total Shaper DPS. That is actually enough damage to kill Shaper in less than a second if you were to somehow shock him and then hit him again, but he would be, obviously dead. It's kind of dumb. Now, that's also with everything up. Vol Righteous Fire, all flasks. But in a situation where your damage is that high, you can actually reliably have all of your buffs up for the full duration of the fight, because the full duration of the fight is about 4 seconds. Maybe less, including like his wind-up animation and such. So that is the end game goal with this build, which actually I would modify it myself. Again, this is the initial path of building. I cannot take credit for putting this build together. I simply am amazed that it's not only... Actually, yeah, that's something I forgot to mention. This is getting buffed. I think I might have earlier, but I didn't mention it in the calculations. It's getting buffed by about 20 to 30% discharge damage. So that's going to be about 20 to 30% higher than the 19.75 million damage number that I threw out earlier. So yeah, I'm just very surprised to see that this build is getting buffed going into next league. And as I said, fair warning, it may simply not work next league. It might be a ninja nerf that GG simply haven't mentioned, because, I don't know, they don't want people playing the build or something. I do have a league start variant, though, for people who are brave enough to attempt to league start it. And this is the passive tree. It is quite a bit different. Well, not quite a bit different, but slightly different. Some pathing changes because you don't have the intuitive leaps, you don't have the unnatural instinct that is in the normal build. And for gear, you have Double Storm Prison, Skullhead. You buy up a bunch of these and corrupt into +1 maximum power charges. Should be fairly cheap and easy to do early on. Soul Mantle, Double Kikuzaru. And then the rest can just be rare items. So it's going to be fairly squishy early on, but it will still have quite good single target. We have 135,000 average hit, and that is on just the 5-link without anything like curses or auras or anything like that set up. This is very basic. And you multiply that by 4 totems, and the cast rate is only 1, so you basically just multiply this by 4 and then multiply it by the about 30% buff that Discharge is getting, and you end up with somewhere in the range of 500 to 700,000 Shaper DPS on like a 40 chaos budget, depending on how many skull heads you go through trying to corrupt for +1 power charge. And if you don't have the +1 power charge, it's still relatively good. So you could start with this sort of setup or something close to it, and eventually scale your way up into the monstrosity that is 20 million-ish Shaper DPS with Discharge totems. Just, be aware that it might be changing for the worse. It might go away as a build. Who knows? That's going to be it, though. Those are all the builds I wanted to cover. 3 good league starters, 1 sort of meme build that might not actually exist next league. I hope you enjoyed. I hope to catch you in League Start tomorrow, and I will see you all there.